verbs as well, but we did ERs in the past tense as well. Well, now I want to throw in some present tense verbs that you'll see very commonly in French and show you how we conjugate those. And I hope this will really help you out with your conversation. And so in this lesson, it won't be a super long lesson, but I want to show you how to conjugate verbs that end with the letters RE. And there are a bunch of those in French. So let's go ahead and throw up a few right here on our screen. We'll put these on the board. First of all, attendre. Attendre. That means to wait or to wait for. Okay, notice it ends with that RE and it's pronounced kind of glottally. Attendre. It's kind of back in the back of your mouth. Okay, here's another one. Entendre. Entendre. To hear. All right. This one is perdre. Perdre. And it is to lose. And up next is répondre à. Répondre à means to answer, to respond to, as you can imagine by looking at it. Looks like respond to almost. And then let me give you one more. Vendre. Vendre. And that is to sell. To sell. Okay. Now that we have this nice little list, let's put up our chart and we'll look at how we conjugate these verbs. Okay. So with verbs that end with RE, the first thing we want to do is take off the RE. Okay. And then we're just simply going to put the endings that we use for these verbs. So let's use attendre to wait. or wait for as our example, okay? So first of all, we take off the RE and we're left with ATTEND, like attend in English. So let's go ahead and put these conjugations up. The je form is going to be attend, ATTEND. S. Okay, attend. And of course, if we were going to say, I'm waiting or I wait for, we would run those together because that je ends with e, a vowel, and the next word starts with a vowel. So it would be j'attends. We run those together. All right, the tu form is going to use this conjugation, attend. Yes, the same thing as the je. A lot of times they have the same conjugation. Okay. Now the il, elle, and on form is going to be attend, ATTEND. Okay, so it's going to sound the same, attend, but it's just going to have a D and no S at the end. And up next, the nous form on the top right up there is going to be attendons, attendons. Nous attendons. We are waiting. And the vous form, we're going to put that EZ ending on there is going to be attendez. We're going to use that same ER ending, attendez. And then we have elle and il and elle attendent. So you'll notice that these have the same pretty much endings as ER verbs in the present tense. But a lot of times we look at verbs and we go, oh, this ends with an RE, not an ER. And we're, what am I going to do with this thing? But really, we kind of treat them the same as we do regular ER verbs in the present tense in French. So if you see any of these verbs, you can easily conjugate them now. Well, mes amis, that wraps up this short and easy lesson. I hope this has been beneficial for you. And on the next 2 lessons, we'll be doing 2 other types of verbs in the
Sometimes you need a coach.
Bonjour, mes amis, bienvenue. Hey guys, and welcome back to the Language Tutor French series. I'm so glad you're with me on this episode. You remember last time we were together, I told you that we're going to do just a short 3-episode series on 3 different types of verbs in the present tense. Well, this is the second one. So this will be a relatively short, easy lesson, just like last time, but I think beneficial. All right. And hey, before we get started, I just want to say, have you checked out the Language Tutor right here on the channel? Pick up a Language Tutor hoodie or a coffee mug. We would love it. And hey, that all goes to support our channel and support our lessons that we do every week and keeping those going for you, putting those out every week. So we appreciate the support. And if you want to donate to the channel, just click About right down below the video here on the channel, and you can click that link to donate to the channel. We sure appreciate it. We really do. Thank you to everybody who's been donating lately. Now, let's jump right into the lesson. We're going to be talking about IR verbs, verbs that end with IR in French. I want to start by giving you a list of verbs that you can jot down, and these verbs are going to follow the same pattern, the same structure that I'm going to go over in this lesson. So I want to start by giving you a little list of verbs that are like this. Okay, so let's jump right into it. Go to the screen. There we go. The first one is this, abolir. Abolir. That means to abolish, as you can imagine. Up next is agir, agir, and that means to act. Yes. Now, you probably guess this next one is rougir. If you remember the colors, you can probably guess what this means. Rougir means to blush. Term, pattern, the same structure that I'm going to go over in this lesson. So I want to start by giving you a little list of verbs that are like this. Okay, so let's jump right into it. Go to the screen. There we go. The first one is this abolir. Abolir. That means to abolish. As you can imagine. Up next is agir. Agir. And that means to act. Yes. Now, you probably guessed this next one is rougir. If you remember the colors, you can probably guess what this means. Rougir means to blush, turn red. Uh-huh. Get embarrassed, right? Okay, up next is avertir. Avertir, which means to warn. To warn. All right, up next is réussir. And réussir means to succeed. All right. Up next is bâtir. Bâtir means to build. And this one, remplir, means to build. And this one, remplir, means to fill. Okay, remplir. Up next is choisir, which means, you could probably guess, it means to choose. Choisir. And now réfléchir. Réfléchir means to reflect. And établir means to establish. Établir. Punir means to punish, and finir means to punish. And finir means to finish. Maigrir means to lose weight. And one more, grossir means to gain weight. Grossir. All right. Now, let's take these away and put up our chart right there. We're going to use the chart to show you how to conjugate these verbs, okay? Let's use choisir as our example. All right, now let's go up here to the top left to the je form. First of all, the je form is choisi. Choisi. All right, now you're going to notice that the endings and the letters at the end of these are similar to the verbs that you've already learned before and the patterns that you've learned before. Okay, now we know that typically the du form is going to use the same, so it's going to be choisi also. Choisi, du choisi. There you go. It's just a little bit of a tongue twister there if you say it too many times. All right, and then we're going to do the same thing we typically do. We're going to change that S to a T for the il, elle, and on form and make it choisi, choisi. Let's go to the top right, to the nous form up there is going to be choisissons. Choisissons. Okay, we have one S at the beginning, two S's later on. And you can probably imagine the vous form is going to be very much the same, but we're going to change that on to ez. So we get vous choisissez. Vous choisissez. And then finally, the il and the elle. Elle, the they forms are going to be choisis, choisis. All right. Now, friends, that's how we do those all the verbs that I gave you at the beginning. This is how you do it with these same endings. All right, so now I want to clear the chart here and I'll give you a different example. This is venir. Venir means to come. And I want to show you that every once in a while you'll have an IR verb like this that's a little different. All right. So here's a good example. So verbs that are like venir are going to be similar to these conjugations here. Let me give you the conjugations of these really quick. First of all, je is going to be vient, vient, V-I-E-N-S. So that's pretty different. Okay. And so that is definitely a strange type of change. We're just completely changing the middle there, or, putting that I in there and changing the S at the end, the ending to S. So it's kind of a big change. But je viens, and the tu form is going to be the same thing. Vient also. And you're probably already guessing the il, elle, and on form are going to be the same except for, yes, the T. We're going to say vient with the T instead of the S. Now, up on the top right, the nous form is going to be nous venons, venons, and vous venez, vous venez. And then the bottom right, the il and elle form is going to be vient, viennent, okay? So friends, that is going to be vient. To everybody who's been donating lately. Now, you'll kind of be familiar if you come across vous venez, and then the bottom right, the il and elle form is going to be vient, viennent, okay? So, friends, that is how we do IR verbs in French. And now you have the standard way to do it, and you have an irregular also. And so you'll kind of be familiar if you come across a verb that's like venir, and otherwise you'll be able to conjugate them just using that pattern I showed you with the first.
If you don't understand the rules of power, you will certainly lose to someone who does.
Bonjour mes amis, bienvenue. Hey guys, and welcome back to the Language Tutor French series. We're in the third part of this short little series where we're looking at some different types of present tense verbs in French. And so this is the third one. Today we're going to be looking at verbs that end with either OIR or OIRE. Okay, you're going to see a lot of verbs in French like this. So this will hopefully be helpful to you. It won't be a long lesson. It'll be short and easy for you. So get ready to take a few notes and let's see how to do these types of verbs. Let's go right to our board and let's put up a few. Here's one for you. It's boire. Boire means to drink. Notice this one ends in O-I-R-E. We'll have two of those and we'll have one that doesn't have an E in just a second. But boire means to drink. Here's another one. Croire means to believe. Okay? Croire. And then finally, I'm going to teach you voir, which means to see. All right? Now that we have those done, let's put our chart up right now. And let's use the verb boire to do our example today on how we conjugate these verbs. Okay? Now, first of all, we're going to think along the same lines in terms of endings that we've used with ER verbs and pretty much every type of present tense verb. We're it's standard to put that S in the top left and the S in the middle and the T at the bottom. So we're going to kind of follow that. So let's look at the je form of this. We have je bois, I drink, je bois. Now, underneath that, we're going to have the same thing, tu bois. All right. The il, elle, on form is going to be bois, but we're going to have a T instead of an S. And here's where we're going to change something. Up in the top right, we're not going to say B-O, we're going to use a B-U. So we're going to, for we drink is going to be nous buvons. Buvons, it's going to be B-U-V-O-N-S. So now that I've told you that, I bet you can guess the vous form underneath it. Buvez, right? Buvez, which is you drink, B-U instead of B-O. Okay, but now, bottom right, we're going to still stick with that B-O-I. So it's going to be il and elle boivent, B-O-I-V-E-N-T, okay? All right, now that we've looked at one that ends in O-I-R-E on the chart, I want to show you voir because it ends with just O-I-R. I want you to see the fact that it's really the same thing. We don't have to worry about the difference between the E and ending with an R. It's going to be basically the same thing. Now, just a quick note, if you were going to conjugate croire, believe, it would be exactly the same as boire. Okay, they both end in O-I-R-E. You would conjugate them exactly the same. All right, but just for good measure, let's go back to the screen and I want to show you the conjugations of voir. All right, so here we have je vois. Okay, so it's going to be the same conjugation. Tu vois. And in the bottom left, we're going to say voir also. But again, you're saying it before me probably. You already know it. It's going to be a T. Now up on the top right, we're going to keep it V-O. And we're going to say nous voyons. And I bet you can guess what the vous form is. Voyez. All right. And then finally down here in the bottom right, we have il and elle voir. But we're ending it with E-N-T. And my friends, mes amis, that is how we do O-I-R and O-I-R-E verbs. They're pretty easy. You'll come across these every once in a while, but now you know how to do them and you won't let them throw you. I know you can bring them right into your conversation. Hey, check out the Language Tutor French podcast and practice with me on the go, and go to thelanguagetutor.co on the net and you can get downloadable written practices so you can practice your hand at your right.
This is your brain when you're struggling to focus. And this is your brain when you're in the zone. But
Bienvenue. Hey guys, and welcome back to the Language Tutor French series. I have a really cool lesson for you today. I'm going to be talking to you about reflexive in French. Now, reflexive is a certain kind of verb, and we have to use them a certain way. It's not a big deal though, okay? But in English, we don't really have this. We don't really have to use it in English. It kind of makes sense, and we just clarify when necessary. But in French, we do have reflexive verbs, and we have to use them a certain way. All right. So first of all, I want to explain to you that a reflexive verb means that someone is doing something to one's self. It might be getting oneself dressed or bathing oneself or putting oneself to bed or getting oneself up. We just say, hey, I got up at 6 this morning. In French, we have to use the reflexive to say, I got myself up at 6 this morning. So that's kind of what reflexive is. Now, if you're looking in a dictionary and you're looking up verbs, or you're online looking up new verbs, and you see this right here, "se," with the verb, that's a dead giveaway. It's telling you, hey, I am reflexive. That's what it's telling you when you see "se" next to it. Okay, so what I want to do is start by giving you some verbs, a list of reflexive verbs that you can go ahead and put down and know here are some very common reflexive verbs, and they're going to have "se" with them, okay? So let's just go ahead and list them, and then I'm going to show you what to do with them. First of all, se coucher, which means to go to bed, to put oneself to bed. Se coucher. Next one is se laver. Se laver, which means to wash one's self, to put oneself. Of all, se coucher, which means to go to bed, to put oneself to bed. Se coucher. Next one is se laver. Se laver, which means to wash one's self. This one is s'appeler. S'appeler. Now notice the "se" has now become an S apostrophe because you know the rule. The word after it that it's with, it starts with a vowel, so it's going to become part of the word. It's going to be S apostrophe s'appeler. So you'll see several of those like that in this list. Okay, but that means to be called, to call oneself. All right, well, we'll talk about that in just a minute. Next one is s'arrêter. S'arrêter, which means to stop oneself. All right, we'll talk about that in just a minute. Next one is s'arrêter. S'arrêter, which means to stop oneself. Se baigner, which means to go swimming, to bathe oneself, is kind of what you're saying. Se baigner. The next one is se passer, which means to take place or to happen. And then you have se trouver, which is baigner. The next one is se passer, which means to take place or to happen. And then you have se trouver, which means to be situated. Let's get several more. Se lever, which means to get up, to raise one's oneself or to stand up. The next one is se promener, which means to go for a walk, to take oneself for a walk. This one is s'asseoir, which means to sit down, to sit oneself down. The next one is s'amuser, which means to play or enjoy oneself. And next is se réveiller, which means to wake up. You know, in English, we say it's reveille. If you're in the military, reveille comes from the French word. Okay. And I think that's a good list. Okay. Now, let's talk about what we're supposed to do with these for a few minutes. All right.
While they're buying stuff that breaks, I'm buying skills that pay.
DataCamp's running 55% off for
Now, we're going to use a reflexive pronoun with each one of these phrases. Now, when I say reflexive pronoun, I'm talking about se. But now sometimes those are going to change, and I'll give those to you in just a minute. But I want to remind you of this example from way back in the very beginning of our series. Je m'appelle. My name is. Je m'appelle. Now, what we're doing is we're saying, I myself call. Okay, that M apostrophe at the beginning is a reflexive pronoun, and it means to myself. Now, notice it's coming in front of the verb, and that's where we put reflexive pronouns, in front of the verb. Okay, so let's go ahead and put up our chart, and then we will put the reflexive pronouns on there. And I'm going to explain what these are. Okay, and then we're going to do some examples of reflexive. So first of all, in the top left, we're going to put m. So if I do something to myself, I'm getting myself up, I'm getting myself ready, putting myself to bed, I'm going to use m. Now, in a minute, just a second ago, you saw je m'appelle. And you know why it became an M apostrophe, because it joined, and appel started with a vowel. So that's why we made it an M apostrophe. But if I do something to myself, that is m. Now, if you do something to yourself, that would be t. Okay, so that goes in the middle left of our chart is t. Now, at the bottom left, we're going to use s. That's what we use. One does something to oneself, he or she, or one in general. Okay, now the top right, let's put this one, nous. Yes, it's the same thing as we. You're gonna find this interesting because we actually repeat it. We'll see that in a minute. And then of course the vous form is also vous. And then on the bottom right, we're also going to use se for the they forms. Okay, so we have me, de, se, nous, vous, and se. Okay, let's take off the chart and let's do an example. Let's put this one up to go to bed. Okay, let's use se coucher, to go to bed. We're going to use that as our example for showing you how to do reflexive. Now, I want to conjugate this verb with each one of the pronouns to show you how it works. So let's start with this. I go to bed. Okay, we won't worry about finishing the sentence right now. We won't say at 10 o'clock or whatever. Let's just start with the phrase itself. So I go to bed is going to be this. Je me couche. Now notice I have conjugated couche, coucher, the same as I would any other time. Okay, I'm just going to conjugate the verbs the same way. So don't forget what you know about verb conjugations. All you got to do is conjugate the verb with je, just like you've always done. But the only thing we have to notice is that we're going to put me right before the verb, saying I, myself, go to bed. Okay? Now, so it'd be je me couche. Now let's go, you go to bed. I'm talking to one person, a friend, someone informally. It would be tu te couches. Now notice I've conjugated tu couches, same as I always have. But I'm putting te in front of it to show that you do that to yourself. You yourself go to bed. In front of it to show that you do that, same as I always have. But I'm putting, now notice I've conjugated tu couches, same as I always have. But I'm putting bed. So now let's conjugate it with he. Il se couche. He goes to bed. Il se couche. Okay. He goes to bed. Conjugate it the same as always. We're putting se in front of it because to himself, he's doing that. Now, she goes to bed. Same thing, just we're going to change it to elle. Elle se couche. Conjugate it just like always. And one in general. You know, you're at a camp or something. When does everybody go to bed? Oh, one goes to bed at, people in general is what you're saying. On se couche. Okay. General is what you're saying. And one in general. You're at a camp or something. When does everybody go to bed? Oh, one goes to bed at, people in general is what you're saying. On se couche. Okay. Just like the he and she form. Now, here's where you're going to find it interesting. Let's go to we go to bed. For we go to bed, it's going to be this. It's going to say, what? This is weird. Nous couchons. Yes, we repeat it. Now, think about this. Nous couchons, the first nous is conjugated with couchons. It's the same as we've always conjugated those types of verbs, ER verbs. But the extra nous is saying to ourselves. So it's we to ourselves go to bed. Nous couchons. And yes, you do have to say both of those. It's a little strange. So we're going to do the same thing for you go to bed if I'm talking to one person respectfully or plural. So it's going to be vous couchez. Repeat it. All right. So the first vous is you, and then to yourself is the second one, and then coucher. All right. They go to bed, and then to yourself. yourself is the second one, and then coucher. All right, they go to bed. I'm going to use the masculine and mixed form. Il se couche. Okay, and you would do the elle form the same way. Well, guys, you follow this pattern with any reflexive verb. Remember, if you see that se, it's reflexive, and you need to use it in a reflexive way. But you can do it. So get these verbs down, and the ones I gave you at the beginning, and get the verbs themselves down. Like, how do you say to sit down or to get up oneself? Then start doing specific conjugations with he and she and I and you and we and they and all that. But you can apply the same format to each one of those verbs, conjugate the verb just like you always have done, okay? Well, guys, that wraps it up for this lesson. I hope it's been beneficial to you. Hey, come visit us on the Language Tutor